Hello, and welcome back to Mckill TV. Today, we take a brief look back at Red Barrel's impressive efforts in this horror gaming classic that is Outlast 2. A good horror game should make you dread the idea of playing, while also keeping you glued to the screen, while you actually are. And Outlast 2 is that game. Outlast 2 is the sequel to 2013's Outlast and is of course a first-person psychological horror game that was released in April of 2017 and is considered by many to be one of the scariest horror game experiences of all time. Today we will briefly look back at many aspects of this game and see what made this gaming experience exceptional. So be warned that this video will contain slight spoilers as we skim over the events and gameplay of Outlast 2. Just like its predecessors, Outlast and Outlast Whistleblower, Outlast 2 offers a single-player campaign, and the game continues that found footage presentation style that is unique to the series. Here in the sequel, you take on the role of Blake Langerman. Blake is assisting cameraman for his wife Lynn as an investigative journalist who is investigating the murder of a pregnant teenager, referred to only as Jane Doe. The game begins as the couple can be seen in a helicopter as they arrive near the location of the girl who's rumored to have gone missing, only to have their helicopter crash in the middle of the Arizona desert. From here the game begins. And as Blake wakes up from the crash, he is startled to find the pilot of the helicopter to be skinned and his wife Lynn is nowhere to be seen. Much like the previous game, Outlast 2 relies on tension-building horror style of gameplay, where Blake is armed with only his camera, and can only fight in scripted events throughout the game, so just like before, the player will have to rely on stealth and the use of running and hiding spots in order to navigate the game's many enemies of Temple Gate. Throughout the game, Blake will have many flashback scenes as he begins to lose his mind, so to speak. Blake will have reoccurring visions of his Catholic school, where a story subplot will play out that features Blake and his childhood girlfriend Jessica Gray. These moments are possibly my favorite part of Outlast 2. In these segments, fractions of the story subplot play out within each segment. And in these moments, the game does a fantastic job of creating tension and terror. In these visions, the player will encounter a demonic entity of Father Loudermilch. In these visions, Jessica will voice her concerns with Blake about being left alone with Father Loudermilch, as it is heavily implied that Loudermilch has had inappropriate relations or advances towards Jessica and potentially other children, as well as it can be determined by his demonic form, which is predominantly made up of his long tongue and other disturbing features, as he frequently chases and stalks the player during those segments. Just like the original, Blake must rely on his camera and its night vision feature in order to navigate and document the disturbing events going on throughout his journey. But since Blake is a cameraman, his camera is a little more advanced than that of Miles Upshur from the previous game. Blake's camera features a microphone that is useful for hearing nearby footsteps and voices of approaching enemies, with the batteries being found sparingly throughout the game just like before. The game's main villains throughout are known as the Testament of the New Ezekiel, a cult ran by Sullivan Noth, with Noth serving as one of the game's main antagonists. The cult's main goal, so to speak, is to prevent the birth of the Antichrist through the systematic murder of children and newborns. But in reality, it is possible they do not actually have any divine visions, but have been driven insane by the malfunctioning experiment of the Murkoff Corporation. The cultists spend the entire night relentlessly pursuing Blake throughout Temple Gate, and occasionally clashing with characters due to their polar opposite views. And by the end of the game, every single member of Testament, including Noth, commits mass suicide, mostly via cyanide poisoning, as they believe they have failed their goals of preventing the birth of the Antichrist. And Noth claims he can no longer hear the voice of God as he orders his cultists to carry out a suicidal cleansing. Noth is one of the game's main antagonists, but there are also Marta, who is considered to be the second in command, as well as the character of Val, who is a former leader of the heretics. These are really the big three baddies here in the story of Outlast 2. Outlast 2 released to mostly positive reviews, while the game has garnered a cult following, and is considered by many to be one of the top 5 scariest games of all time. However, this series still has its fair share of strong criticisms, as most casual gamers find Outlast's overall style and presentation alongside its gameplay to be very frustrating. But to be honest, a game like Outlast isn't supposed to be easy. It isn't supposed to hold your hand. The game is built upon the idea of creating dread through terror. This isn't Call of Duty. This isn't Resident Evil 8. This is what horror games should be. They should be scary. Regardless of what you think of the overall story here, the gameplay alone creates tension and horror, more so than a captivating story arc. This game and this series is beloved by horror gamers like myself and many others who want this type of experience. And I can see why a casual gamer wouldn't be fond of this type of gameplay, and in that case, maybe the Outlast series isn't for you. But if you seek a true horror experience, look no further, as this game delivers on that, and I would highly recommend this game to anyone looking for that type of gaming experience. Overall, my final thoughts on Outlast 2 are that this game is straight up terror and dread balled up into one big clusterfuck of a game that is a wild ride from start to finish. As you can see, the game stuns with its gruesome visual graphics, as it haunts the player with a beautiful, horror, ambient, and rich soundtrack that plays off the overall vibe of this game and really increases and adds to the game's horror. I really enjoyed the Outlast series as a whole, and look forward to the eventual release of Outlast Trials. I hold the original Outlast in high regard, but there are some things that Outlast 2 just does better than the original. But overall, I hope you all enjoyed these Outlast retrospectives, and if you haven't seen my retrospective video on the original Outlast, I highly recommend checking that out as well, as I really enjoyed looking back on these games. But as always, be sure to like this video as it really helps out, and if you're interested in more horror and retro games, be sure to subscribe to Mckill TV, as I tend to cover as many as possible. But until next time, this has been Mckill TV's Outlast Retrospectives.